What's up, guys? Eric here. We are doing week 10 now of the program. So this is the last habit you guys are actually going to encounter that we're going to be working on. Then we're pretty much going to be wrapping this thing up. So last week, this is what we're working on here now. Meal combining. Mainly when we're talking about meal combining, it's macronutrients that we're going to be focusing on partitioning. So what do I mean by macronutrients? Three primary macros out there that you should all be familiar with by now: protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Almost every food contains each one of these three macronutrients, but obviously there are foods that are higher in these macronutrients than others. For example, bread would obviously be higher in carbohydrates, low in protein and fat. Something like egg whites would be high in protein and low in the other two. So the thing that we're really going to be dialing in on is mainly separating the fat and the carbohydrate-rich foods this week. So what we'd like you to try doing is to combine high protein and high fat meals together, and then keep high protein and high carbohydrate meals together, and keeping the fats and keeping the carbohydrates away from each other. So first, why are we doing this? Number one, high carbohydrate and high fat meals typically are really high in calories. Those two things in particular, you can ingest a ton of food, a lot of calories, without really being aware of it. There's a lot of calories in a pasta dinner, in a baked potato as well. Fat has higher calories. It's the most calorie dense of the macronutrients, and it's easy just to intake a lot of food. So it's a good idea just to keep them separate. Secondly, this is more of a physiological reason. When you eat a carbohydrate-rich meal, you typically get a very dramatic insulin response. So insulin is it's a signal for your body's cells to take in nutrients, and that goes for both fat cells and muscle cells. So when insulin is very high, your body is receptive to nutrients, and during that time, we would like you to not have a lot of free fatty acids floating around in your bloodstream. It pretty much buffers against storing too much fat. So I don't know if that was totally clear for you guys out there, and if you want a better explanation, we can certainly talk to you about that in the gym. But that's generally the gist of what we're going for there. So they're not necessarily bad, but they can be combined a little bit more intelligently to reach your body composition goals just a little bit easier. So some examples of what we're talking about in terms of actual meals and how to recomposition things. Think of the high carbohydrate foods. So, I mean, what do we got here? We got rice, we got pasta, we got potatoes, we got breads. I mean, hopefully you guys aren't having too much of the breads or the pastas, but those would typically be your higher carbohydrate foods. So think of a typical meal: steak, baked potato, and vegetables. What's one way that we can kind of change that meal to have it fit and have it adhere into this habit this week? I would say probably get rid of that potato, because steak is a higher fat type of a protein, so it's a very high protein meal. It's a very high fat meal. If you want to go for a little bit more sustenance, maybe you can put like some olive oil on top of your salad, so you would have meet that requirement for high protein and high fat. Likewise, if you were going for maybe a post-workout meal and you wanted to have some carbohydrates to replenish you, I would choose maybe a lower fat protein source like a skinless chicken breast. So rice, some black beans, some chicken breast with some vegetables would be a great post-workout meal, because that meal is very, very low in fat. But again, the rice is there for a higher carbohydrate source. So there's a little bit of obviously gray area in this. You can't absolutely get this perfectly and have zero carbs or zero fat in any one meal. You can only kind of minimize them and keep them to relatively low doses. But the trick I found is really to figure out what protein sources are higher in fat and which protein sources are lower in fat. So, white fish is typically very lean. Salmon is much, much fattier. Likewise, egg whites are obviously practically zero fat, zero carbs, very, very high in protein. But you start to introduce the egg yolks, and that becomes a little bit higher on the fat scale as well. But this will really take some thinking and some analyzing down to the plate to see, how exactly is this meal looking? How can I shift this around? What items can I remove? What items can I add to make this just a little bit better in terms of the meal combining side of things? What I would really suggest everybody does with this is start taking photos and taking pictures of what they're actually eating. Bring them into us or post them on Facebook. That way we can help give you some feedback, because this one's a little bit trickier just to pin down. Also, and we went through all the dialogues this week. It was really, really insightful, but I don't think anything really replaces seeing a plate and seeing meals, because that's really how we talk, that's how we think. It's listing out foods and talking in those terms. It's good, but it's not really ideal, and it's tough to really get a sense of portions and what your dinner plate actually looks like, because that I think is the most important thing. So give yourself a check mark if you do this every single day. Each one of your meals, if you can have a high protein, high fat, or a high protein, high carbohydrate meal, give yourself a check mark for the day. Keep reporting in. This will be the last week of a new habit. Next week we'll kind of wrap up with a finale and see if we can integrate all this stuff together. But other than that, that's it. Send in your questions, comments on Facebook, and hope you have a good week. See ya.